Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode, I'm going to cover The Matrix Revolutions. I'm going to do a quick overview of The Matrix Reloaded, and The Matrix Revolutions, and then we're going to get right into it and find out just how well the Matrix trilogy stood up. Now, in my opinion, The Matrix was an iconic movie. It's still relevant today. It's still referenced today in fiction and in nonfiction. You can see references to it even in the news headlines of today. So I would consider The Matrix a perfect film. I mean, perfect in the sense that it hit its mark, it made money at the box office, and it spawned legions of spin-off concept movies, TV shows, you name it. Now, The Matrix today, as of October 2019, has a tomato meter score of 88% and an audience score of 85%. That's pretty high for a film that is 20 years old. And so I don't think these numbers are going to go up or down anytime soon. I think even 10 years from now, assuming Rotten Tomatoes is around, these numbers will be about pretty much unchanged. If we look at the next one, the sequel that came out in 2003, The Matrix Reloaded, it still has respectable scores, 73% and 72%. Now, this is a little surprising to me because I think the second and third movies age very poorly. I mean, they show, what we're calling today in Hollywood as the cash grab effect, where you get something very successful and then you milk the concept for all it's worth. I would consider the Matrix trilogy to be a cash grab in every regard. And, The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, the two follow-up movies, were both filmed at the same time, and so that is why you'll see The Matrix Reloaded listed as 2003 and The Matrix Revolutions also listed as 2003. Now, The Matrix Revolutions, at least on Rotten Tomatoes, you can see people have given it no mercy. It drops on the critic score all the way to 35%, and the audience score is 60% as well. So that's a huge drop. Again, I'm surprised this drop isn't seen on the second movie, but for some reason, people are more forgiving of the second film. Now, I saw the first film in '99 only after it was released on DVD, and in fact, it is the first Hollywood film that was released on DVD, so this makes sense for a lot of people my age. Now, The Matrix had become such a phenomenon by the time the sequel was released that I did see, like most people, the sequel in the theater, and I don't remember which theater I saw it in, but I remember that there was quite a production. The theater actually had a couple of costumed actors throwing out prizes to the audience. They were dressed as characters from The Matrix. One was dressed like Neo in the long leather jacket, and another was dressed as Trinity. And even in the movie theaters at the time, 2003, this was quite a spectacle. People anticipating how the story would develop. Well, the problem is the story didn't really develop. The two brothers, who are now sisters, they had what they had to say in The Matrix, and then they didn't have anything else to say, apparently, because The Matrix Revolutions, like its predecessor, Reloaded, is simply a stretched out cash grab. In my opinion. So let's get into the rotten reviews on The Matrix Revelations, or Revolutions. Trust me, there won't be any revelations, but revolutions. And we'll take a look at just what people think of this, October 2019 and going back. So here we have a 3.5-star review at the very top. A lackluster ending, but still interesting. Well, that's very forgiving. Let's see what the next one says. Half a star. Slow, boring. If you go to watch this, I would get therapy at an asylum for the insane. Trash, garbage, junk, all boring and rubbish acting. Reeves was a poor choice as lead role. I'm disappointed. There's better sci-fi films out there for you to watch. P.S. Never watch twice. Burn your copy. Waste of money and precious time. The film is also cursed. Unless you want to drop dead, it wouldn't bother at all. Just a money spinner. Again, they're saying it's a cash grab. This seemed to have really offended them. Perhaps they were an original fan back in '99. Hard to say. They don't mention that. But I would say from the half-a-star review, they found this particular sequel highly offensive. Now, before we get too much further, I'll say I give The Matrix 4 stars, 5 stars, if you will. Now, Reloaded, I found myself incredibly bored in the theater as soon as we hit the long, drawn-out freeway chase, and that's when my interest kind of petered out, and I was checking the time. I would say for Matrix Reloaded, I would drop it to 2.5 stars. I guess I could give it 3 stars for the effort on the CGI, but by today's standards, the CGI is not special, so again, 2.5 stars. On Matrix Revolutions, I will go ahead and state my personal opinion is, as a Rotten Tomatoes score, I would say 1.5 stars, because it's more of the same, and it is almost insultingly more of the same. Now let's continue on. 1 star. Compared to The Matrix, this movie is flawed and unbrilliantly crafted. Yeah, I would say, flawed. I would say it's flawed because there's just nothing new to present. It's just a cash grab. 5 stars. Revolutions is overcomplicated in plot. If you didn't like the movie, rewatch it until you truly understand the ending. Wrong, and I say not only wrong on the 5 stars, but I would say wrong on that it's overcomplicated. No, it's completely uncomplicated. It's more of what we got in Matrix Reloaded. They just stretched it out. In fact, both of these movies, like I mentioned before, were filmed during the same production period, and it shows. It's just like Part 2 and 3 are one gigantic movie that was pointless in and of itself. The reason I say that is because The Matrix ended perfectly. It ended perfectly with the main hero of the story becoming, in effect, Superman in the world of The Matrix. So to start this again with him somehow, being the underdog or fighting with agents in the Matrix was totally ridiculous and a letdown. There was no tension. How could there be? Because he was already pretty much Superman or a god. A cash grab in all the worst ways. And a lot of movies now are, right off the bat, people are saying they're cash grabs just because they're sequels. I disagree. This movie truly did become a cash grab because it had nothing new to say. And, if you look at the follow-up movies that these directors had later, they've had several movies that are complete bombs, and it's easy to see why. Most people can't get through 10 minutes of them. They were truly one-hit wonder directors, and The Matrix was their one-hit wonder. 2 stars. Finally, at long last, I get to meet and shake hands with the film that sunk 1,000 ships. The movie that single-handedly besmirched the integrity of an entire franchise. The cinematic event that added further credence to the old urban legend that the perfect movie trilogy is simply impossible to deliver. Though let's be honest, that was already out the window after Reloaded. I agree. The Matrix Revolutions. Look, all attempts at stalling aside, this movie is pretty bad, and I know that's not a hot take. I would agree with this 100%. I agree with the 2 stars. I might give it 2.5, like I said. Or, well, no, let me correct myself. I would give 2.5 to Reloaded. Specifically this, 2 stars. Yeah, I might take it down to 1.5. I agree otherwise perfectly that you can't excuse this by just saying it's impossible to deliver a perfect trilogy. That wasn't the intent of the directors when they filmed The Matrix. It was to deliver a perfect movie, and they happened to do so. Unfortunately, it was the only time they ever did deliver a perfect movie, or even a movie that I would rate above 3 stars. In the next review, 3.5 stars. It's an improvement over the second Matrix. It redeems itself in the end, but Neo is missing from most of this movie. Well, that's a nitpick that I think you could put on Matrix Reloaded as well. How else could you have a sequel in which, in the first movie, the hero of the story became a god or Superman? You would have to have him removed from most of the story. And in fact, that's what happened in Matrix Reloaded and again in Revolutions. There's no way around it. Unless you're going to make a Superman movie, which this isn't, it doesn't work, does it? 2 stars. The longer it goes on, the more confused I get. I agree on the stars, but I disagree on the confused part. There's nothing complicated to make you confused. It's very long, stretched out, and boring. The action scenes, while they put a hell of a lot of money and effort into them, just came across as time wasters to me because they were too long. 1.5 stars. Bad acting, convoluted story, and little payoff for the bookend of a trilogy. Again, I think that's because this was never meant to be a trilogy. It was a perfect movie in its own right. The Matrix should have just ended. We should have never had a trilogy. The only reason we did is because somebody, the directors and whoever else, they needed to collect some more money, guys. That's it. 0.5 star. This movie really sucked. I agree. 5 stars. It ends the series perfectly. Neo is the one true savior of the Matrix and humanity. Well, I disagree. He was already the savior of humanity in the first movie, and you didn't need to see him come back and like prove the point a second or a third time. It was completely unnecessary, as I regard this movie as completely unnecessary. 4 stars. Better than Matrix Reloaded. Great as sci-fi chase and war movie. As the sequel, Matrix Reloaded was a mere redo of Matrix 1 with Trinity, the one stuck in limbo instead of Morpheus. This film, Matrix Revolutions, is all-out war, and no one is guaranteed to survive. Okay, let's stop right there. Matrix Revolutions is all-out war against only the boredom that sets over the audience. It's pointless. In fact, the only thing more pointless than this movie itself was the rave scene, and I believe that was in the second movie, in which it just wasted a lot of our time while we watched the characters dance to a rave party in their underground hideout, Zion. Completely a waste of time and filler. You know, when I saw it for the first time and scenes like it, I was wondering why it was going on. What was the point of it? Did it have some did it have some point to move the plot forward? But no, it didn't. You know, thinking back, it was just filler. They needed filler to keep the movie, you know, to its 2-hour running time. And in fact, this movie's over 2 hours. It only had about 20 minutes of usable plot in it, in my opinion. 5 stars. My all-time favorite movie franchise. Well, okay, if you just say that the first movie is the reason why, because the next two are just tacked on filler. There's no point to them. 2 stars. Not English. 1 star. As you go through the trilogy, the SFX go through the roof and the dialogue plot hit rock bottom. Exactly. But see, I disagree. I don't think the special effects go through the roof. I think the special effects are just drawn out. They're long. In the second and third movie, we didn't see anything that we hadn't seen before. I mean, yes, we saw a car chase that went on forever, and we saw in the third movie, this one here, we saw, you know, the protagonist fight 100 or more or 1,000 or however many CGI copies of Agent Smith that he could fight at one time, and it was completely boring. It was worse than the freeway scene in the second one. It was filler. It was pointless. And, you know, it's one of those scenes where he's dispatching and flinging around thousands of copies of Agent Smith, and the whole time your butt is in the chair hurting, and you're shifting around uncomfortably, trying to figure out how to get the numbness out of your ass. That's what this was like. 0.5 star. Just awful. One of the worst films ever made. It wasn't the worst ever made, but it was the most painful on my ass. I'll agree with that. 5 stars. Really underrated, all because of a recast. I'm not sure what movie they're talking about, so totally irrelevant. 3 stars. this movie can't really stand on its own. Well, I agree there. This movie is complete crap. It's just writing, it's just filler slapped on the tail of the first perfect movie. I hated it when I first watched it, but it has grown on me. Nothing about it stacks up to the first movie. Far more action than storytelling happens in this film. Really don't care for how the plot was resolved at the end. It felt like something was missing. Well, see, I'm going to stop there. Yeah, of course it did. The way this movie ending, this movie ended, and the way it ended the trilogy, it was just a waste of time. I mean, all those battle scenes in Zion, all the people that fought and died to protect their secret underground world from the machines, it was all pointless because in the end the main hero just merged himself with the machines and kind of made peace with them. Well, then what was the point of all the people sacrificing themselves in these long drawn out epic battle scenes that were also too long in Reloaded and Revolutions? It just made the whole thing pointless. 3 stars. Starts off good, but the confusing ending ruins it. 4.5 stars. Quite a few people voiced concerns with this movie, but I loved it. 5 stars. The sequels are great, but not as great as the original. I love the battle between Neo and Agent Smith. If you just want to see Neo fight Agent Smith and 100 copies of him or 1,000 copies of him, you know, that's just copy paste. I mean, I'm assuming you'll also enjoy Rise of Skywalker, the Star Wars final movie of the Skywalker trilogy. If it just has 1,000 Imperial Star Destroyers shooting at everybody and each other, then you'll enjoy it. Again, it's the same mindset. It's mindless. It's pointless. It's copy and paste stupid, is what I call it. 2 stars. This film is a clear example of bad execution on ideas. No, I would disagree. I would say it's worse than that. A bad execution on something that was interesting would have been better than this. This was just tacked on filler. 3 stars. An okay ending to a trilogy, although it is the weakest. Disagree. It's not an okay ending to anything. We had a fantastic ending in the first Matrix, the original movie. 4 stars. Matrix Revolutions, the concluding part of the Matrix trilogy, whilst initially disappointing, does improve with successive viewings. I disagree. Spectacular looking even today, the large battle scenes are particularly impressive and epic looking. The writing, as with Reloaded, has some horribly corny moments, but is thankfully much less convoluted and mentally taxing this time. Both sequels fail to draw you in totally, something that the first movie managed so effortlessly. I agree on some of that, but why are you giving it 4 stars? The first movie, it sucked you in effortlessly. It was pretty much perfect. And here we have just tacked on cash grab. It does not deserve 4 stars. Knock it back to 2, then we'll talk. 5 stars. Epic conclusion to a mind-opening story. What a journey. Disagree. 3.5 stars. It's not amazing, but I feel like this movie is an acceptable conclusion to a pretty good series. Well, I disagree, and also I should bring up that the word out there now is that we're going to get a 4th Matrix movie. So apparently this isn't the conclusion because there's more cash to grab out there, guys. Now, in my opinion, I don't care if you bring back the original actors, de-aging or not. It will fail because it's going to go down harder than, endlessly rebooting Terminator, simply because, people were sick of this cash grab by Revolution. You want to make a 4th one? Oh, get ready for a total bomb. I guarantee it. 3 stars. Good conclusion that ran out of steam and goes on a bit too long. A bit too long? Wow, that's an understatement. 4 stars, very apt ending, like the trilogy, 2.5 stars. Though the action is still choreographed and entertaining and the emotion is high, this conclusion suffers from repetitive themes, overused special effects, and long gone originality. I agree partially, but that there's high emotion? No, there was no high emotion. The tension was gone because, from the first movie that Neo is already Superman, he's a god. So what kind of tension were you trying to pull off here? Really? No, no emotion, no tension. 4 stars. The philosophical mumbo jumbo is forgettable, but as a sci-fi action movie, it is still great. Well, I agree with you. The sci-fi mumbo jumbo philosophy, if you will, it wasn't really philosophy. You had Neo go into a room with a lot of computer monitors and meet somebody who is supposedly the master controller of everything. It tried to do some kind of philosophy, but I've seen it more than once and I still don't get what they were getting at. It's just a mess. It's a mess of, let's throw something out there that's so confusing and wishy-washy that it passes as philosophy, because I guess to the directors of the movie, anything that's too convoluted to understand, that means it's like above our heads and it must be philosophy. That's the sense I got from that. It's kind of insulting. 2 stars. I'm sure you could nitpick great things that are in this movie, but it's an overall lackluster conclusion with a bad final showdown. No, I could nitpick bad things. Great things, there aren't any great things. I completely disagree. I agree on the 2 stars. I disagree there's anything that can be categorized as great. 4 stars. Admittedly not as good as the first two, but still pretty damn epic even by today's standards. Wrong. CGI-wise, not epic. And I should mention something, and I don't know if this is a problem with the way the original was released on DVD. The first movie, The Matrix, I've noticed that a lot of DVDs of The Matrix, they have like a weird green tint to them. I don't know if that was intended by the directors. And the second movie, it has a little bit of a tint too, not as bad as the first one. By Revolution, though, that green tint has seemingly been removed from the DVD version of this movie. Again, I'm thinking that's like a problem not with the CGI or with the production, but something the directors were using to set the mood. I know there's the green effect where the green letters go down the screen, and that's an iconic Matrix image, the Matrix code. But there was a weird green tint to the movie, and in the second one, I noticed it during the freeway chase. In the third one, not so much. It's like they realized that the green tint was overused. I've heard that this weird tint is only in the DVD version. I certainly didn't notice it in the theater. That's just an aside. 4.5 stars. Maybe not as good as the original, but exceptional nonetheless. No, not exceptional. Let's move on. 0.5 star. The best word to describe Matrix Revolutions is disappointing. From feeling like it was rushed in production, the Battle of Zion feeling very over the top, and even the unnecessary death of some characters, this movie doesn't live up to the hype that the 2 other movies tried to make it. If you were to watch these 3 movies, just don't bother with this one. Honestly, they could have just made this franchise a 2-parter by just putting all of the good scene in this one and reloaded and well, I kind of agree, but no. I think the best idea is to just watch the original movie and don't bother with the second and third one. They're a waste of your time. 1 star. The Matrix series wasn't that good to begin with. Luckily, this movie is probably the final nail in the coffin for any potential sequels, prequels, or remakes. Wrong. There is another Matrix movie coming as of 2019. That's the word out there. The Matrix wasn't any good to begin with. Totally wrong. If that were the case, it wouldn't still be relevant today. It wouldn't be recognized today. It wouldn't be referenced in TV and movies today. So you're completely in your own world on that one. 1.5 stars. It's just an awful sequel. Yeah. 5 stars. Not sure. 3.5 stars. I hated how the Matrix saga ended when I first saw this. I think the subterranean rave scene made me spew. I agree, there was no point to it. But in hindsight, the actual plot, if you paid any attention, was always about the actual humans and their conflict with the actual robots. It was inevitable that to conclude the actual storyline, there had to be a movie about that. No, I disagree. I'm going to stop there. It wasn't inevitable because the movie already had told the audience that this had happened many times before. It was part of that mumbo-jumbo philosophy that other reviewers mentioned. So the fact that this movie ended it with Neo joining or making peace with the machines kind of conflicts with its own philosophy. So we're left to believe that maybe this has all happened before, including the ending in this movie, and that it's just going to happen again. Again, it takes all the tension out of it. You're just left with, well, why do any of this? No. Uh, 2 stars, anticlimactic and dull. The War for Zion is ambitious in scale, but dull in execution. I agree with that. Like all the effort, energy, and CGI and the acting that was put into the actual battle in Zion with the machines. It didn't feel like there was tension there. It felt almost like you were watching a cartoon. I'm not saying the CGI was bad. I'm just saying watching them battle with mechs against the machines, it felt so on the nose, predictable, and the tension. You could see what they were doing. They were trying to do the tension with reloading, and oh my gosh, I might not be able to reload the equipment in time before the machines get to these battle bots they were using. It's completely like cartoonish, and even upon the first viewing, I found it as cartoonish. It didn't hold me. It didn't have any tension. 2.5 stars. I don't know what's so disappointing about this third installment comparing to the second one. To me, it's practically the same, like 2 parts of one story, which they are actually. But it's true, it's even more CGI than Reloaded. I disagree it's the same as Reloaded. I agree it is the same movie. They just broke it into 2 acts or 2 parts. It is disappointing because I think a lot of the audience just didn't get that it was a cash grab until they saw part 3. It occurred to me on seeing part 2. Like I said, it hit me as soon as the freeway chase that this was just a cash grab. It just took people longer to see it, a lot of people. 1 star, should have taken the blue pill. Nice reference. 1 star, Matrix Revolutions, a disappointing end to the Matrix trilogy where characters and ideas take backseat to mindless and boring action. Agreed. 0.5 star, haven't watched this movie since I saw it on the premiere date, and just remember it was one of the top 3 most disappointing theater experiences I have ever had, and don't dare to relive that experience by rewatching it. I agree 100%, but it didn't take me until this movie I had that same experience on Matrix Reloaded. 1 star, a review for Ollie and Eric, bad movie, really bad. I'll agree on that. 5 stars. My all-time favorite movie. Rotten Tomatoes is sorely wrong about this film. No, I'll agree. Rotten Tomatoes, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, is there's something going on with it. But in regards to this movie, no. The score is accurate. In fact, I expect the audience score on this to go down over time. Slowly, but it will sink. 1.5 stars, a disappointing end to a once great trilogy, overstuffed with action and a weak narrative, crushes all hopes for a good second sequel. It sounds like he's referring to the second one, but if he is referring to, he thinks there's going to be a sequel after Revolutions. Well, as of 2019, we know there is. That's the plan. But in 2017, I'm surprised that anybody wanted another one. It wasn't on my mind. 4 stars. The 1999 generation were too blown away by the first Matrix to really give this a chance. They built up their perfect closing chapter in their heads and in return tore apart an above average, masterfully crafted trilogy finale. I disagree. It's best seen immediately after Reloaded as Chapter 2 of the 2-part story. The film is magnificent. The pace for the first 30 minutes is thrilling. I loved Captain Roland and a dejected Morpheus. The chase between Sentinels and the Hammer is one of the most impressive. I disagree. We had seen the Sentinels battle the humans in the sewer, so to speak, in the first movie. We got more of that. It wasn't exciting. It didn't have tension. I never at any point thought that the heroes would die, or certainly that, Superman Neo was going to die. No, I disagree. 3 stars. Even though The Matrix Revolution is one of the poor movies in the series, I still kind of like it. Yes, the strong plot is gone, and the ending of the movie is really disappointing, but the characters still remain their coolness, and the final battle between Neo and Smith is completely awesome. I disagree. There really was no final battle between Neo and Smith because, we already knew that Agent Smith and all the other agents were just computer data. So a final battle with them really until a copy is just placed in front of Neo again. This doesn't make any sense. It was just pointless. Final battle or not, it was pointless. 2 stars, terrible, boring Matrix movie. I agree 100% and with the 2 stars. 3 stars, plagued by the same confusing and convoluted themes that started to peak out in Reloaded. Revolutions is honestly one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen, which is both a good and a bad thing at the same time. The Jesus symbolism, which briefly appeared in the first 2 films, has been dialed up to 11, and the film suffers as a result. As in Reloaded, all the action with Neo involved is honestly just boring and has no real tension. The final confrontation between Neo and Agent Smith is criminal, yeah. Again, this reviewer brings up something. Yeah, there is Jesus imagery, and it really hits over the top in your face in this film as he is lifted up almost like he's on a crucifix by the machines at one point. Again, there's no point to it because it goes against the philosophy we've already been spoon-fed in Reloaded. So I don't understand. It's like the directors didn't know what to do. So first they made up the sci-fi mumbo jumbo philosophy, deliberately making it so it's over everybody's head. And then they mixed in Jesus imagery with it as some kind of, experiment in dabbling between religions and philosophies. It didn't work. It was just jarring. And it showed desperation on the point of writers or directors or both on how to end this thing to keep butts in seats. And the only reason butts were still in seats is probably because they had paid the ticket price, and most people just won't walk out of a film even if their ass is hurting because they've spent, even back in the day they would have spent at least $15 watching this. So you just don't want to walk out and have it be a total waste. But yeah, this movie was only good at making asses sore in seats. 2.5 stars. Final battle for Zion is impressive, but other than that, this film cracks under the weight of its creators' ideas. See, I think the creators' ideas were all spent in the first movie, and it came out perfect. There were no further ideas. It was just, what can we throw out there to get another $15 from people 2 more times? 2 stars, enlightening round, not sure on that one. 4 stars, the ideas and Zion were lame. The visuals were okay. Too bad it was not better. Would have been more interesting to see Neo fighting random Smiths until the Oracle assimilation came to nearly kill him over stupid Zion battle where the humans were sitting ducks for the machines. It's kind of a rambling statement there, and I still agree because that's the way the 2 movies made me feel. It just rambled on and there wasn't a point to it, although I can agree it was bad. I don't understand the 4 stars because that rambling review seems to suggest 2 stars. Again, people must be loving the CGI, that dated CGI. 4 stars, great movie. I love the whole series. No. 2.5 stars, the most forgettable among the 3 movies. Revolutions may still be action-packed and visually impressive, but there is no other way to describe than stale and derivative. I kind of disagree that there's even a differentiation between Revolutions and Reloaded. In my mind, they're interchangeable, and you'll find that my comments, I'm maybe mixing up the events from one to the other. That's because over the years they just blur together. That's how relevant they are. They're complete nonsense, and they blur together into mush, a mush of CGI and Jesus imagery. And again, I'll restate it again. The first movie, The Matrix, was already perfect. It had the perfect conclusion. There's nothing forgettable about it. These 2, of which I'm focusing on Revolutions, they're just a mush together mess. 2.5 stars. Like its predecessor, the final installment of the Matrix trilogy is overcomplicated in plot. No, I disagree. It's not overcomplicated. Unless you're referring to the philosophy mumbo jumbo, That's overcomplicated, but there's nothing plot-wise here. There's nothing complicated. This review goes on to talk about excessive in CGI. The entire second half of the film is a huge barrage of special effects, and while it's not a huge bore, I disagree. The brilliant choreography has been sacrificed in its place, save for the final battle between Mr. Anderson and Mr. Smith. It's always a pleasure watching the two stars square off. No, I agree. There's not even choreography here. It's just CGI. It's copy and paste CGI. Where you're taking the mouse and you're moving these characters around and having them fight boring copies of each other. There's nothing choreographed here. When you use that word, which I find hard to pronounce sometimes, you're talking about you're scripting the movements of actual actors, whether they're dancing or fighting. There's none of that here. This is all CGI. Using the word choreography is kind of an insult to choreography. 3 stars. It's good movie to watch. I disagree. 4 stars. A revolutionary trilogy ends with a visually stunning but horribly placed epilogue to the previous movie. We pick up where we... Okay, I'm not going to summarize this. There's no reason here for 4 stars. 2.5 stars. Not a 3.6 out of 10. Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, that's right on. 3 stars, not English. 3 stars, 3 out of 5 stars. This is the weakest of the Matrix trilogy, but it does have some good aspects. It could have been greatly improved by cutting out about 30 minutes of the Zion scenes and battles and switched out for more scenes with Neo and or in the Matrix. The Zion scenes and battle in the middle of the film really dragged the story down and took away from what people really cared about and really enjoyed about part 1 and 2. The Zion scenes definitely served an important purpose. Well, see, I kind of agree with this, but I see what they did. The reasons why they put in all this battle and Zion scenery was because they had to remove Superman, otherwise known as Neo, from the equation. Otherwise, you didn't have a story. So they had to show you this other stuff. And it was boring because, again, it was just there to keep Superman out of it until he could fight the big bad. There's nothing in there that's interesting, and so Zion was the best they had. 3 stars. Ending trilogies is hard work, especially early ones. The very last scene is where the film really fails, as well as this one becomes excessively heavy-handed. No, it has nothing to do with trilogies. This is a trilogy because you had a perfect movie and then you tacked on 2 pointless filler episodes to get people to pay extra. That's all. There's no trilogy here. 3 stars. Without spoilers, I'll just say that they are definitely getting carried away with themselves at this point, and it hurts the movie. Nevertheless, it's still a good, fun finish to an No, it's only fun if you're like totally bored. Even drinking wouldn't make this more exciting. You'll just fall asleep faster. 2 stars, a disappointing finish. I'd prefer a reboot start by overwriting this film. No, in fact, maybe that's what they have planned for the 4th movie that we hear about, some kind of reboot. No, it's going to fall completely down. 3.5 stars. While the film is disappointing at times and not quite the conclusion to the trilogy most audiences wanted, let me stop there. We got the conclusion we wanted. It ended with the first movie. It was the perfect conclusion. The audience didn't expect another conclusion after this. I think what they expected in 2 and 3 was to at least see something new. But I don't think they expected to get a conclusion. They already had their perfect conclusion. So no, I disagree. They just wanted something new. We didn't see anything new. There was nothing new. More CGI is not new. 3.5 stars. The Matrix Revolutions mixes the best of the original and the worst of Reloaded. The acting is wooden. However, Neo is no longer the immortal, unrootable superhero he was in Reloaded, which makes the final fight scene all the more interesting. No, that's not true. Neo is still immortal in the Matrix. He's still the unrootable superhero. But remember, that's in the Matrix. The reason they put in the story and put it in Zion and had all that film footage wasted, battling in Zion and around Zion in what would be the real world is because that's the only place Neo wasn't Superman. You get it? Neo was the problem. The ending of the first one made him as Superman, so the only thing left to do was show people fighting, or even Neo fighting as a human in Zion, because there's it's like you're dealing with somebody that's already a god. So what kind of tension could you have? You couldn't. So Zion battle was the only thing they had. The Matrix, another 3.5 stars. The Matrix Revolutions, blah blah blah. I would say I probably disagree, whatever that is. 3.5 stars. Then the last of the trilogy comes the revelation of the story. No, I don't get it. There's no revelation. It's just a time waster. You don't learn anything in Matrix Revolutions that you didn't already know. All you learn is that, well, we're not going to fight the machines anymore because now Neo kind of merged with the machines. Yeah, right. That's really a letdown. 2.5 stars. The Matrix Revolutions is a very disappointing and unsatisfying end to the trilogy of The Matrix. The focus is still on Neo, but he is only in the movie for 30 minutes or so. The rest of the movie is just a long, boring, and tiresome fight. Even the fight near the end was a very disappointing one when compared to the fights in its predecessors. Again, the reason why Neo's not in this very much is because he's Superman, and the only reason the fight between Neo and Agent Smith in the first movie was good was because he hadn't yet become Superman. He was on the cusp of it. You wanted to see it. It was even somewhat expected, but he wasn't Superman. He still there was still tension to get out of the story. That all disappeared when he flew off at the conclusion of the first one. That flight off like Superman was perfect, but that was it. That just got rid of any kind of tension you could have in the second and third. The trilogy was just a cash grab. 0.5 star, ruined of a great franchise. I disagree. I think if you consider the franchise to just be the first movie, this didn't ruin it. It's just unnecessary. 3.5 stars. The third installment of Matrix trilogy, but somehow not as groundbreaking as the first two, and the story is quite boring too. However, I must admit that the special effects is top-notch, even viewed in the year 2016. Well, this review is from summer 2016. No, I disagree. CGI, the CGI in the Matrix, even a Reloaded, was starting to become cartoonish. It's starting to become cartoonish in 2019. It all leads to just cartoonishness, and that's my final word on CGI for this. You end up in a cartoon. 3 stars. Despite a better pacing than its predecessor, it comes to a surprisingly failed conclusion. The better pacing, I don't know, because really the second and third film are just one film chopped in half, so that could be your problem with the pacing. 1.5 stars. The final chapter of the Keanu Reeves starring blockbuster Matrix series came to a grinding halt in The Matrix Revolutions, which was widely panned when it was released back in 2003. After a stellar first entry and a lackluster follow-up, Revolutions is the final nail in the coffin. Well, I'll stop there. Apparently it's not. We hear there's a cash grab fourth movie coming, so 3 stars, 61%. It's not a terrible movie, but in terms of finishing a strong series, it comes up short as the special effects overshadow the storytelling. Yeah, they had to, because the Battle for Zion was the only thing left. Tension for Neo's story was non-existent. 3.5 stars, not good, but still entertaining. No, it's not entertaining. It's boring. 2.5 stars, another big disappointing sequel to The Matrix, though still a little superior to the very bad second movie. This movie is really a CGI extravaganza, and that overshadows the aspects of a story that could have been very interesting had the Wachowskis spent more time developing it than just releasing 6 months after the second one. The performances are watchable this time around, as you can see that Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne really tried to save this franchise through their likable performances. Well, there wasn't anything the actors could have done to save it or make it better. They just did the job they were supposed to do. Even if it had been written with better dialogue, even if it had hard-hitting, perfectly timed Marvel-style one-liners, it still wouldn't have saved this movie because this movie was just unnecessary. The second one was unnecessary. It didn't matter what happened. You were going to come away with this with a sore ass and, knowing that you wasted your money on a cash grab. That's the way this is. And I'm going to read one final one. 4.5 stars. This is the conclusion of the Matrix trilogy. The fast-paced action and suspense continue with lots of close calls, amazing stunts, and nick-of-time saves. I'll stop there. This is going to be the final review and my final word. When we talk about fast-paced actions, lots of close calls, amazing stunts, nick-of-time saves, we had seen this already in the first movie, and it was pounded into us in the second movie. That was it. There was nothing left. You can put all these things in another 5 movies. It won't get anybody's sore ass back into the seat. This is just boring. We've seen it all before. You need something more than just like pointless, long, drawn-out freeway chase scenes. There was no story here. This was all filler. That's my final word on it. Avoid this movie. Avoid the second one. Do yourself a favor and probably don't spend any money on the fourth one. The Matrix is a perfect film by itself. That's all there is to say. That's the way it should be remembered. And until the next episode of Rotten Reviews, I am signing out.